Malcolm, we're trying to look at this. We're reading what the union is saying. We've read the memo itself. We've heard the government and the CFIA response. What do you make of this?
Well, my friend Mr. Lemieux wants to suggest that this station is about only finding out whether the animal is 21 months or younger, and that's a major criteria. And certainly it is something the Japan market requires, but the memo doesn't talk about 21-month-old animals. It talks about spinal dura. It talks about fecal material. It talks about ingestia. And so clearly, if it didn't tell them to look for that particular material on a Japan carcass, it was because it was there. And clearly, if it was on that carcass, it had to be on other carcasses. And the reality was, the memo says, if you see it on another carcass, ignore it. Let it go. And so that's extremely troubling, that we'd have a directive from a senior member of CFIA to frontline inspectors telling them not to do what they're trained to do, which is to see a defect, to see fecal material or see ingest on a carcass, and basically have that carcass taken offline or cut it off, one way or the other. That's what should happen. That's what inspectors expect to do. They probably were doing it, and the reason they were told not to do it is because, my assumption has to be that the line was going too fast and they needed to get those carcasses through. So they said, well, ignore those ones and do the others. And that simply sets up a double standard.
All right. Frank Valera, I'm trying to make sense of this. First it says ignore them when it says if they see OCD or minor ingestia. And then it also says your first reaction should have the issue dealt with without a line stoppage. This is in the memo. Who is CFIA working for? Is it to make sure that the line doesn't stop, which is a corporate, that's a private company that runs it, or is it to make sure that the safety standards for Canada are as high as possible? What do you think this is? There a double standard here?
There's an inherent conflict of interest with the minister and CFIA to put food safety first or put trade first. And it seems that this memo suggests that they're putting trade first and putting the cattle through processing at all cost. There is a double standard, Evan, and it's shown, and the proof is in the pudding here, for lack of a better term. What happened 2 weeks ago is they changed their protocol. 2 weeks ago, they said, okay, ignore that memo. Let's apply the same standard as we do for Japanese destined meat. To me, that suggests that there was a double standard. And if that protocol is different, what other protocols are different along the food safety line? And that's why we keep asking for a third-party audit, because my bet is that memo did not go to other abattoirs in Canada that have Japanese destined or non-Japanese destined meat. And that can only be determined if we have an independent, objective body go in that isn't trying to cover up, isn't trying to manipulate the message that I think Mr. Ritz is going to try and do with his panel of experts that he's going to have look at these circumstances.
Pierre, I want two questions that remain. There is no mention of 20-month-old or 20-month-old carcasses. It simply says Japan-eligible carcasses and ignore it otherwise. So there's no specificity here. And number two, why the memo says your first reaction should be to have the issue dealt with without line stoppage. Is that acceptable? Is there an inherent conflict of interest here? Shouldn't food safety be the inspector's first priority rather than the speed of the line that has to do with the profits of a private company?
Absolutely, and food safety is the top priority of this government when it comes to Canadians and food consumption. The thing to realize, Evan, is that this station is towards the front end of the slaughterhouse line. So all of those matters are being handled downstream of the inspector. He is there at that one station simply to certify for the Japanese certain requirements that they have for importing beef from Canada. All of the food safety issues happen upstream of him, but downstream as well. And the memo is saying focus simply on certifying for the Japanese what it is they're asking for in their imports.
I mean, you just saw the inspectors union.
There are 46 to 48 inspection staff at that plant.
Right,
that's
but you're
only
talking.
CFIA.
But I'm talking about the union representing. These are the inspectors you want. Clearly, if they don't understand the memo, if the union is now saying there's a double standard, this is the inspectors who say, "Gee, there's a double standard. We're told to ignore it. We want to." How do you explain that to the public when the inspectors don't even understand the kind of CFIA notices here?
That's why I'm rather shocked at that letter. And I think when you read the second paragraph, like you did read, it's even more shocking. And I think that the information contained in that letter is inaccurate, and I think that it is not helping the situation.
But what does the government do about it? When the CFIA says one thing, the inspectors say something,
right?
And the public is seeing another thing.
Yes.
I mean,
so you know what the
what's
government
the
does?
response here?
They explain the reality of the situation, which is what happened at committee today. 2 hours in front of committee. This was explained to committee at length. Then there were full media interviews to explain it again. There was a full CFIA briefing this afternoon that the media participated in to explain it all again. And so if everything is understood as it really is, if people understand the reality of the situation, they realize that food is safe in Canada and that this inspection station is as I'm
so
saying
you're
it.
just
It's
saying,
simply
I got 30
confirming for an
seconds here for the other
international
guys.
market.
There's not a higher standard, Mr. Lemieux, for Japanese food. There's not more rigorous standards for Japanese-bound food than for Canadian food?
No. When it comes to food safety, the food that comes out the end of a slaughterhouse is as safe for Canadians as it is for international markets. We have a world-class food safety system. Canadians know that, and I'm saying to Canadians that what we send to Canadian plates or send to international markets, it is the same when it comes to food safety.
Mr. Allen, Mr. Valera, real quick.
I mean, if there was an issue around the memo was okay for the last 4 years, you didn't have to change it 2 weeks ago. Right. Clearly, what they've done is they've reversed it and said, stop the line now if you can't find somebody to take it off the line for you. So now they're telling them, inspect the Canadian carcasses just the same as you inspect the Japanese ones. Clearly, until 2 weeks ago, in this plant that had the largest Canadian meat recall in our history, there was an issue and a problem. And this government let it continue for 4 years. They didn't just issue this memo in 2008. They kept resending it out year after year until it was Bob Kingston of the Inspectors Union that went to the minister and said, Minister, there's an issue with this. And they finally changed their mind about how to do it.
But fundamentally, Mr. Valera, let's be fair. CFIA went and they've done an explainer. They did that phone call, briefed the media on this. Is this just a case of they inspect Japanese according to Japanese meat on one part of the line, then Canadian meat, but in the end it all comes out safe?
It doesn't all come out safe. If not, then when? If not at that point when something is found, when? Other people along the line have different responsibilities. And yes, food safety is a responsibility for everyone. But looking for fecal matter is a secondary point beyond that point in the process. And why did they suddenly change their protocols 2 weeks ago when they got caught? Canadians are as entitled to the same level of food safety as Japanese, and that's our concern.
I got to leave it there. The Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Agriculture, Pierre Lemieux, Malcolm Allen, the NDP's Agriculture Critic, and Frank Valera, the Liberals' Agriculture Critic.
Thanks, Evan.
Gentlemen, always good to have the three of you on the program.
Thanks, Evan.